Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Hey, thanks for being here. Tonight's broadcast brought to you by NatureBox. NatureBox ships great tasting and wholesome snacks right to your front door. You can forget the vending machine, and you can start snacking smarter with wholesome, delicious stuff like mini Belgian waffles. Support this show. Order a free NatureBox sampler box. Just go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Log on, check it out. naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Thanks for supporting the broadcast. Let me encourage you, if you are already dreading a morbid show about death, just know this. I have formatted the show so that, yes, we will address a difficult topic, or a topic that can be difficult. And we are going to speak honestly about what can be kind of a dark subject. But my hope is that you will leave tonight's broadcast inspired. So it's not going to be doom and gloom and doom and gloom all night long. We're going to talk about some people who have dealt with tragedy, how we approach our own inevitable death. But at the end of the day, I really want you to feel good. And for that reason, I'm going to cap the show tonight with something kind of special for you, okay? So just hang in there. I'm going to start the show with an article that was published on the Rapture Ready website. Now, some people would say, why in the world are you going to start the show with this Christian nonsense? You're going to find so much of it out there. It's low-hanging fruit. It's just so easy, blah, blah, blah. And there's probably merit to that criticism. I receive that critique, okay? But I read the article as I was sort of doing the research for tonight. I stumbled upon it. It's called Atheism, the Cult of Death, by a guy named Todd Strandberg. Now, a lot of this type of stuff makes me crazy. You know what it's like when you see something written at Answers in Genesis that's just so blatantly false. It's just so wrong-headed and unsubstantiated that you get livid. You sit on the edge of your chair, the vein on your forehead is just about to explode. You just think, this is insane. Conversely, when I was reading about atheism, the cult of death, I was just laughing my ass off. I mean, it was just so out there and so completely contrary to the facts. And I thought, well, what the hell, let's explore this insanity together. So I'm going to read that for you here in just a second. Then we're going to get into your perspectives on death and dying, and how do we approach life. And again, we will leave you with hopefully some very inspiring things. Coming up later this week, I'm doing a special bonus podcast, probably tomorrow or Thursday, where I'm going to read for you a chapter of my upcoming book that I've been kind of alluding to over the last weeks and months. It's almost here. It releases officially in April, but I'm going to actually read a chapter of the book for you. And I have, a selfish motive. I really want people to enjoy themselves, and I want them to like what they hear. And if they do like what they hear, I want them to support the book. But I'm not going to ask you to jump without knowing kind of what the feel and flavor is. So I'm just going to read a whole chapter that the Facebook community helped me select last week. I sort of threw some options out. Which chapter? They chose the chapter. I'm going to do that on a podcast I'm calling Sacred Cows, which is based on the title of the book. That's going to be in a day or two, so look for it on Blog Talk Radio and on iTunes. Next week, the show is called I Was Outed. It's one thing to, quote unquote, come out on your own terms, to tell somebody you're an atheist on your own terms. It's a whole other thing to have somebody out you, whether they meant to or not. I've had people tell me that they were accidentally outed by their own kids, right? Their kids knew they were atheists. They were too young to really have a filter. And they're at a family reunion. Oh, no, mom and dad don't believe in God. Boom. The cat's out of the bag, and there's no getting it back in. So we're going to talk about that. Were you outed by someone else, and what were the consequences? How do you feel about it? How did you deal with it? You can email podcast@thethinkingatheist.com. On Tuesday the 17th, I'm doing a broadcast called The Debunkers, and I have a panel of debunkers joining me for the broadcast, and it's going to be awesome. I've got Dr. Harriet Hall, the Skepdoc, on the panel. James Underdown from the Center for Inquiry Los Angeles. He's been a long-time debunker out there. And then I've got the Science Babe, Yvette Guinevere, going to join us. And that's Tuesday the 17th. So we're going to talk about all kinds of bunk out there, and we're going to debunk it on the radio. The week after that, a show called Religious Schools, Religious Rules. In March, we're going to talk about the Unitarians, and then I'm also scheduling for mid-March to play while I'm in Australia. I'm going to have a sort of a preloaded show for you with the guys from the Cognitive Dissonance radio podcast. A lot of folks like those guys, and we're going to do a conversation in March. So I've got some very, very exciting things on the roster. If you have anything to contribute for any of those shows, the email address is podcast@thethinkingatheist.com. You know, it's funny, I was working on a video promo for the Unholy Trinity Down Under tour, right? I pulled up a video clip of me speaking in Albuquerque, and I am 25 pounds lighter than I was at the time that video was recorded. And it's funny, you know, you look in the mirror every day and you don't really see it. And then you see a photograph or you see video and you're like, whoa, really? You know? And I could tell you that I lost the weight because of Nature Box, but I would be lying. Truth is, I lost the weight because I hired a trainer and I got my ass on the tennis court and I replaced cheese enchiladas on the menu with grilled chicken and veggies, okay? But, and this is absolutely true, Nature Box has been a part of the process for me. It came along at a really good time because instead of candy bars and potato chips, I've been able to snack on things like the roasted garlic pumpkin seeds, right? The roasted Peruvian corn kernels, PB&J granola. They even have this apple and cinnamon oatmeal thing. It comes in a small container, cooks in like 3 minutes. It's easy, it's good, it's awesome. Nature Box has given me sort of a snack alternative, shipped right to my door for free. Hundreds of nutritionist-approved snacks, 0 artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners, 0 grams trans fats, no high fructose corn syrup, and a website that goes right past the eyes and to the taste buds. If you need a healthy snack option in your own life, you can get a free trial sampler of Nature Box's most popular stuff. Support this show, snack smarter. Log on right now to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. A guy named Todd Strandberg, I hadn't heard of him before, but he has an article on the Rapture Ready website, and it's titled Atheism, the Cult of Death. Just brace yourself. In fact, you might want an alcoholic beverage. But I want to start with this because this is how many people in religious communities, it sort of reflects on how they approach death and why they feel religion is necessary to be able to handle the concept of death. The article says this, quote, "As long as people have believed in God, there have been those who take the opposing view. The ranks of atheists have always been small, never amounting to more than 4% of the population. The key problem with atheism is that it lacks a strong, quote, selling point. The followers of this view find purpose in life by attacking the validity of the Holy Bible. Atheists are so opposed to anything linked to God that their hatred gets in the way of common sense. One of their most grievous errors is a cultic fixation with death. I've read the views of several leading atheists and have found an almost universal embracing of death. For them, life is just meant to come to an abrupt end. They reject any option that provides a potential solution to the dying process. Atheists are all for someone wanting to live longer, but if they desire to live forever, it suddenly becomes a vice. They pride themselves on being free of religious dogma, yet they cling to one creed: in death there is no hope." Albert Einstein was a brilliant man, but his insight was restricted to the material world. Quote, "The concept of a soul without a body seems to me to be empty and devoid of meaning. Neither can I nor would I want to conceive of an individual that survives his physical death." Unquote. Mark Twain is widely quoted by atheists for his nothing gained and nothing lost view of death. Quote, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." Biologist Richard Dawkins says we have no need to complain about dying, because most people will never have a chance to be born. We better complain now, because once we die, we're no better off than those folks never born. I see this welcoming attitude toward death as a form of insanity. If we managed to defy such massive odds to be born into this world, it would be foolhardy to so willingly surrender such a precious gift. I don't regret depriving some worm of a good meal. They don't even have enough intelligence to say, "Boy, Todd tastes good. Yum." Atheist cheeriness about the end of life extends to the second death. Even though they don't believe in a hell, most express a bizarre willingness to take a swan dive into the lake of fire. Pat Condell is a well-known atheist on YouTube. In one of his latest videos, he said, quote, "So can I say to the people who have said they're praying for me, don't do it. I'm beyond redemption. I categorically reject God. I wholeheartedly deny the Holy Spirit. I'm resigned to damnation, and I'm absolutely fine with it." Unquote. If there is no God to grant us an afterlife, atheists should be the main frontline cheerleaders of an effort to find immortality through research. One of them should be the Jerry Lewis of natural causes. Yes, please donate so we can find a cure for what is responsible for 100% of non-accidental deaths. I don't know of any leading atheists that plan to be cryogenically frozen. According to the game plan, medical science will eventually advance to the point where it can revive and restore a dead person to perfect health. These atheists could spend their first few days of new life dancing on the graves of foolish Christians who trusted in a pipe dream. I've looked at several atheist sites about the subject of cryogenic, and they almost universally focus on the technological obstacles. One saying the $170,000 base rate fee should be used to make this life better. But what should it matter to a billionaire atheist like Bill Gates, who could easily spend the money and continue his charity work? If cryogenics failed, it's not like he'd know the difference. I'm writing on an article that deals with the odds of our existence. In the article, I listed two possibilities: God's involvement and one driven by random chance. God. All right, that one does piss me off. It's random chance. It's Josh Feuerstein all over again. The article continues. I spoke with two leading atheists. He doesn't even list them. I spoke with two leading atheists about a section I'd planned to title Atheist Reincarnation. I had to change it to Random Reincarnation because the atheists told me they reject the possibility of life ever reforming. I was stunned by this view because evolution is based on them winning the long odds of random chance. It makes no sense. They would argue that it can't happen again. I spoke with theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss at a Las Vegas conference, and he said atheists don't like to use the word eternity. Even though the forces in the universe may remain constant for all eternity, they avoid the term because God is too closely associated with it. Atheists go as far as calling eternal life a curse. They argue that life with no end would eventually become boring and unbearable. One atheist said that if he was allowed into heaven, after a few thousand years, the empty perfection of the heavenly realm would compel him to ask God for annihilation. I don't see the warm embrace that many atheists associate with death. At the end of their lives, they would lose everything they achieved in this world. Their loves, discoveries, and experiences would all be instantly voided. I can only conclude that the obsession with death on the part of atheists is the result of demonic Delusion. Well, I'm glad that's cleared up, everybody. It's demonic influence. The article says even a godless, skeptical mind should know that one of the basic driving forces in nature is the desire to preserve life at all costs. One thing that helped me to remain confident in my faith is the understanding that there are forces dedicated to attacking my beliefs. If God was a lie, and there was no life after death, why would people have such a volatile, allergic reaction to a message that seems so reasonable? When I see people who blindly embrace death, I see the fingerprints of the one who brought death into this world. John chapter 8, verse 44, "You are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and has nothing to do with the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies." And there's some other scriptures that sort of round out the column on eternal life, and Jesus was resurrected so that we could also have resurrection, that kind of thing. I'll spare you. There's not one evidential argument in this quote-unquote article. It's all about emotion, right? Essentially what the author is doing is he's just saying, well, how sad would that be if there wasn't an afterlife? If this is the only life there was, I mean, who wants to think like that? It's just about wish thinking, as Hitchens used to say. And the idea that saying that death is a part of life and just essentially embracing that reality is not a worship of death. And the whole thing about Pat Condell saying, toss me into the pit. Right? It's essentially missing the entire point. Pat Condell is defying the very hell that is used to frighten people into Pascal's wager to embrace a religious belief by saying, you know what? You're not going to scare me with hell. There's probably some really awesome people who didn't qualify for heaven. And by the way, after I got a real good look at the God who created heaven and populated heaven, I don't want to hang out with him. That's essentially what he's saying. Let's get the free thinker on the case. Let's get the atheist perspective on death. I had an email from Brad who said this. He said, I'm no longer a Christian, but even when I was terrified of death. People in a church would say there's no need to fear because I knew where I was going, to a better place, a paradise, where we would all be given new bodies and never feel any pain or fear. It was never of comfort to me. I have a disability which does shorten my lifespan. I'm paralyzed and sick with fear. When I spend too much time thinking about death, just never been able to imagine when I close my eyes that is all there would be, darkness. Even though, yes, I know I wouldn't see anything because my brain would be dead. I fear dying alone more than death itself. There's a song by Dave Matthews, Gravedigger. When you dig my grave, could you make it shallow so that I can feel the rain? Kind of how I feel. We all have to do. But when I do, I still want to feel like I'm alive. How does one learn to accept death as inevitable and appreciate the beauty of all your energy and molecules once again becoming part of the cosmos? I hope you read this on the air and would really like to hear your thoughts. Sincerely, Brad. Brad, let me encourage you to just listen to the rest of this broadcast, but specifically make sure you listen to the end of the broadcast, and hopefully you will be comforted and reminded of how amazing this life is. Deb sent a message and said, have you ever seen Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium? Critics said it was one of the worst children's movies ever. And yet at the end of the movie, when Mr. Megorium is about to die, his friend says to him, you can't go, you have to live. And he replies with a smile, I have. I hope to get to the end of my life and say the same thing. So no, I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of not truly living. Your life is an occasion. Rise to it. Deb, thanks for the message. Roy said, I welcome the release of death. I'm passing time until then. No fear, no regrets. A trip to the unknown. Alone and unaided. It will be fine with me. Ben sent an email where he quoted Sam Harris from a talk in 2011, where Harris said this, quote, "We all go to sleep every night and just disappear. We lose everything. Deep sleep for almost everyone is synonymous with oblivion. You lose your sensory experience. You forget your life. If you never woke up, you wouldn't notice it. If death is synonymous with non-existence, there's really nothing to fear, and slipping into it may feel as satisfying as slipping into sleep." Thanks, Ben. I'll have to look that speech up. 2011, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, David Wolpe, and Bradley Artson. I'll have to look that up. Claire said this, "I want to start off by simply and sincerely thanking you for producing this podcast. It's made me laugh, think, and feel an authentic sense of community and camaraderie many a time. I've been an atheist from the cradle, never believing in a God or an afterlife. Up until recently, my feelings about death could have been summed up in the following quote by the great Mark Twain, 'I do not fear death. I'd been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. I was comfortable with the idea that we are all mortal, and that our time here is made all the more wondrous and beautiful because it is finite. Though I maintain this perspective regarding my own death, recently I've developed another death-related anxiety. I'm now a mother to the most precious baby girl. Ever since her birth, I've become hyper-aware of the inescapable fact that either myself, my husband, or she will be the first of us to go. And that thought scares the living daylights out of me. Any way you slice it, it's unbearable. Sometimes I can dismiss the thought. Other times, it's all-consuming and causes me great dread. I find myself plagued by late-night anxieties, imagining accidents, illnesses, etc. I'm afraid something will happen to me before she can remember me or really know what she's meant to me. I'm terrified of the possibility that I could ever be asked to exist in a world without her. I dread the idea that one day she will cease to exist. I want to live a long, healthy life where my husband and I get to experience every part of her journey together as a family. The fact that this is only a possibility and not a guarantee is quite simply the scariest thing I've ever faced. I try not to linger on these thoughts, but they do come creeping up in the silence of late nights. I know, logically, that all we can do is make the most of the time we have, and that is exactly what I intend to do. I just don't feel quite as brave regarding death as I once did. I've quickly discovered that motherhood makes one vulnerable in all sorts of brand new ways. I'd also like to share that since having my daughter, I've been asked by several family and friends some version of the question, well, how could you look at this amazing blessing God has given you and not believe in Him? To which I always reply, how could you look at my beautiful and innocent daughter and think she was born with a heart full of sin worthy of eternal torment in hell after a lifetime of submission to men? That one usually leaves them quite speechless. Thank you for taking the time to read this and for all you do for the atheist community. Your work is truly appreciated. All the best. Claire, your letter's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for sharing a perspective tonight. I'm going to spend a second here on the phone with a woman named Carol Fiori. She lost her husband in a tragic accident years ago and went on to write actually a couple of books relating to that tragedy and how she coped with death as an atheist. She's been kind enough to join us on the show tonight. Carol, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So do you have a religious background or are you a lifelong atheist?
I was actually raised by very religious Catholic parents, so I grew up going to catechism classes, nuns smacking me on the fingers, and
oh, come on! I mean, is that just is that a cliche, or does that really happen?
Actually, it does happen. It does happen.
We're doing a show called Religious Schools, Religious Rules in a few weeks, and the thumbnail for the broadcast has a nun with the ruler ready to slap Knuckles, and I thought it was just a joke. I'm like, does that actually happen?
It does. I actually had some nuns when I was a kid in school that I liked quite a bit. And my mother was trying to push me for some odd reason to be a nun myself. And she actually had gone to a convent for a while. But I became an atheist by the time I was in high school. I am a scientist, really. I have 3 science degrees, and I was also very interested in history, and none of it made sense to me. And then when my mother told me that animals didn't go to heaven, that was kind of the last straw for me as a kid. And so I've been an atheist pretty much since I was about 13.
Carol, the reason you and I are speaking tonight is because you had a tragedy in your own life. Can you sort of tell that story for the audience?
Yes, my husband was a fairly well-known experimental test pilot, and he was killed as a result of a tragic plane crash on October 10th of 2000. He was hospitalized for 36 days after the crash with 50% burns, and it was absolutely horrific. I lived at the hospital with him the whole time, and my husband had been an atheist his entire life. Both of his parents are. He was actually raised with all religions and no religions, I like to say. His parents exposed him to lots of different kinds of religions. He read the Bible when he was growing up, but my husband really was a scientist, and he always was an atheist. And when he was in the hospital, people would not respect his wishes to not have them pray over him. And that was the point when I came out of, as I like to call it, the atheist closet. Because Eric and I hid in the atheist closet most of our lives. He was a military pilot, and it just didn't go over well in the military to be an atheist. And there were people who would not have flown with him if they had known. So we pretended. And since I was raised Catholic, it was a very easy thing to do, to pretend. It was very disingenuous of us to do that. But he was worried about his career, and I didn't want people to discriminate against our kids. But when he was in the hospital, I saw no reason not to be honest, and so I came out, you might say, and I've never regretted it. I lost a lot of friends because of it, but I have gained so much, and I feel like I've helped a lot of people in my situation.
Well, Carol, don't let me cross any boundaries here. You can tell me where our comfort level is, but I'm curious. I mean, did he and you have conversations about what if I don't survive this? I mean, was he lucid? You were able to have some dialogue when he was in the hospital? What was that like?
We were not able to have any conversations where he talked when he was in the hospital because he was intubated.
I see.
But I was able to ask him questions the first couple days, and he was able to move an arm or nod appropriately and tell me. But we were married 20 years, and we had many conversations over the years about life and death and all kinds of philosophical things. And Eric made it very clear to me what he wanted when he died, and he didn't want people praying over him. He was one of those people who absolutely loved life, lived it with a passion that I think was kind of unmatched by most people, grabbed every opportunity he could get. And he used to say, I don't need to believe in an afterlife. I've got heaven right here. I'm making it for me right now. And of course, he loved to fly. He was born to fly and doing what he loved.
It was a Catholic hospital, is that correct?
It was.
And so what's the protocol? Do they bring the nuns in from room to room to give blessings and to pray and to comfort and that kind of thing? Or what was the context?
Well, when the accident happened, a priest came to my door. So it was...
A priest brought you the news that your husband had been in an accident?
Well, my next-door neighbor, who was the wife of one of the people that my husband worked with, came over and told me what had happened. And then there was the knock on the door, and I know that sounds a little cliche, but there was a knock on the door, and there was a priest standing there waiting to take me to the hospital. And at the time, you're so distressed and you're so distraught, and my husband's been in a crash, and it's all I could think about. And it was only later that I thought, why did they send a priest?
Yeah.
to get me. So the priest took me to the hospital, and of course there were nuns, and it was a Catholic hospital. And I just want to say right away that because I wrote a book called Flight Through Fire, which was about my experience and what Eric went through, in order to write that book, I had to go through 1,600 pages of medical records from the hospital. And so I just want to say that the hospital didn't make a single medical mistake. It was pretty amazing what they did, the care that they gave him. Having said that, I found the religious aspect a little hard to take, and I actually threw the priest out of my husband's room amidst a kind of tantrum for me, screaming and yelling.
You kicked him out of. You kicked him out.
I kicked him out of his room. I kicked him out of my husband's room, and there were lots of stares from people. My sister was trying to calm me down, but I just felt after a couple days that people were not respecting what I wanted, and I didn't want people praying over him. So it was a little. It was a little embarrassing on my part how I did it with the screaming and the ranting and the get out of his room, but I just couldn't take it anymore. But in a way, it was good that I did that, because after that, then everyone did respect me, and the hospital didn't send any more, nurses that were religious saying things, and there were no more nuns in the room. So it was a shame that I had to do that, but
I understand. I'm not sure how to couch this, so let me give it a shot here. But we're talking about, essentially, in many cases, people who are acting as agents of comfort. They come in and they take a hand, and they, with genuine compassion, because they believe they are doing something good, they come in to say the words of healing. In their minds, the words of healing, the words of help, the words of hope, the words of heaven. And many of those people who are operating in that capacity are genuinely attempting to show compassion. Was that your experience, or did you feel like they were trying to get everybody in the room saved during a difficult time? What was your take on it?
I am a fairly optimistic person, and I think the best of most people, and I really believe that they were trying to give me comfort. I don't think that they knew that they were being annoying and that they were being hurtful.
Yeah, they don't really hear the insanity of he's in the hands of God moments after this horrible plane crash kind of a thing. They don't see the paradox even as the words come out of their mouth. I understand your frustration. And that was building and building and building. It
was. And there were quite a few people who came to visit in the hospital. And I really believe that they meant well. And I tried to be kind when they said things like, God has a plan, and God only gives us, he doesn't give us more than we can handle. And then after Eric died, people would say he's in a better place. And that was hard for me. Depending on the mood I was in, I would shift back and forth. Sometimes I would try to be nice. I knew the person meant well, but then sometimes I would get angry and I would lash back at them and say things like, a better place, how is a hole in the ground a better place? He wanted to be here with his kids, with me. And the God has a plan thing I never understood. What kind of a God makes little children watch their father suffer and die? I sometimes think it's more comforting to be an atheist because you don't have to wonder if you're being punished.
Carol, what are your thoughts about death? I mean, we all eventually have that day coming. You've experienced the death of a spouse firsthand. By the way, I'm so sorry for your loss. I mean, we all grope for the words of comfort during these times, and there probably are no words. But I mean, I know a lot of people grieve with you. But having been through that, and again, seeing the temporary nature of this life, what are your thoughts on death?
Well, thank you for saying that, and I am sorry is about all you really need to say to someone who suffered a loss. Or you can say something like, is there anything I can do to help you? But as far as life and death goes, I think when you've suffered a loss like I have, you think about it a lot. It's part of the reason I wrote my book, a grief workbook for skeptics, to try to help other people in my situation. I don't think we should be afraid of death. I mean, we're all going to die. I think it's okay to be afraid of how you're going to die. None of us want to suffer. We all want it to be quick, but to be afraid of death is a little bit silly. I think that you have to take, and I know this sounds a little bit cliche, but you have to take every day and try to make the best that you can of it. Live your life ethically. Enjoy even the little things, beautiful birds, going for a hike, your family, your pets. I find a lot of comfort in writing, and I like to travel and meet new people. And I don't need to believe in any kind of afterlife because we've got this amazing world right here, and people just don't grab onto that. And they really need to, instead of thinking, oh, well, there'll be something better when I die. Well, there isn't. This is it. And so you have to really make the best of it. And there's just wondrous things in this world if you just open your eyes and take a look at them.
Has the tragedy sort of increased the urgency? I know you're about to go on an amazing overseas trip to do, is it a life dream to do this? Can you spell it out for us, for those who are listening, what you're about to do?
Well, I'm going to hike the Milford Track in New Zealand. It's one of the more famous hikes in the world. And it helps me with my healing to go away with no cell phones, no computers, and get out in nature. Nature is one of the tools that I really use for healing. My grief, even after 14 years, is still kind of there. I think of it as kind of a kind of a chronic disease that you have to manage. And so I have different tools that I use to manage that. My pets help a lot. But being in nature and looking at the beauty that's around us really helps me a lot. And I've been to New Zealand before, and it is absolutely one of my favorite countries on the planet. And it is so breathtakingly gorgeous with these wonderful birds. And hiking the Milford Track is something that I've wanted to do my whole life. I wish that Eric was doing it with me. But I'm going to do this, and it's going to be a healing thing, and hopefully I'll see penguins when I'm there. And and several of my friends have, because I have religious friends as well as non-religious friends, and they have said things like, Eric will be watching over you when you're there. And I know they mean well, and so I'm not saying anything back to them like, please don't say that. But, he's not watching over me. But he had this really amazing life, and he used to say that all the time, that he had this really amazing life. And I was very, very lucky that of all the girls on the planet, he loved me. I got to have him. He was my guy. And so it hurts me that he isn't here, but I am happy that he got to live this amazing life. And he and I went on many, many travels. We lived abroad for many years, and we had many, many adventures, and I'm very happy that we did. So I'm looking forward to going to New Zealand, this just incredible country, and reconnecting with nature, and excited to be going.
Carol, you're just precious. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And I'm sure it's a difficult story, even after all these years. But I think it helps people to hear the words, to sort of hear the voice of someone who's been through it and has sort of gone on. Life continues, for better, for worse, the ups and downs. It's not always easy, but it is certainly something that should be embraced and lived. And you are a reminder of that. So thank you for sharing your perspective on the show today, okay?
Thank you.
Dr. Darrell Ray has a website. It's called kidswithoutgod.com. And there was a letter posted on one of its pages, I'm assuming from a young person. It said, Dear Darrell, I've recently decided that I'm an atheist. The problem is I'm now much more anxious about my own mortality and the mortality of the people I care about. See, kind of a recurring theme. It's scary to suddenly feel like there isn't a God looking out for us and that there will just be nothing after we die. Also, I can't help being afraid that if I'm wrong, I will go to hell. How should I cope with these fears? Darrell responded, Many people fear their own mortality. I don't want to die either. Not because I fear going to hell, but because I love living and don't want to stop. That sounds like Darrell, right? It is natural for a person to not want to die. Unfortunately, religion teaches an unnatural fear of death beginning when we are very young and incapable of understanding such profound concepts for ourselves. The, quote, salvation that religion preaches as a way to lessen the fear of death also serves as a bullying tactic against those who do not adhere to that religion's dogma. Religion distorts children's natural fears before they're old enough to examine information critically. What you learned as a child can be difficult to unlearn as a teenager or young adult, and irrational fears are often the hardest to overcome. Remember that your fear of hell is an accident of your birth and not an indication of reality. Your parents taught you to fear hell because they fear hell. If you'd been born to Hindus, you would have been raised to believe in reincarnation. If you'd been born a Viking, you would have been taught the only way to get to heaven was to cross a rainbow bridge after dying gloriously in battle. Consider joining a recovering from religion group to meet others dealing with the same issues. Many people who've been atheist a long time will tell you they had similar fears when they first left religion. Listen and explore how they dealt with those fears. It is on a page at kidswithoutgod.com. How do atheists handle the fear of death? Really good stuff. And Dr. Darrell Ray does really good work. Area code 660. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
This is Jason from Trenton, Missouri.
Jason, thanks so much for calling the broadcast as we talk about what is to some kind of a morbid topic. Many of us find it fascinating. We're talking about death. What's your perspective on all of this?
To be honest, well, first off, big fan, love what you've done. You've been huge in my deconversion, if you will.
Thank you.
As it pertains to death, I have to reflect back in my kind of almost like a 20-year deconversion, if you will. I think that I was much more fear-riddled as a believer than I am now. And I know that seems ironic, but when I started to see the world for what it is, to see the universe and reality for what it is, and how insignificant my part is, then the life that I had and seeing, I think I read a quote somewhere saying that we have two lives and we only discover the second life when we realize we only have one. Like you said, once the epiphany hits, you realize when you have only one life, that's when your paradigm changes. And then life becomes so much more precious and fragile and delicate, and seeking the world and what our short little slice of life has to offer and what we can do to help others achieve great things within ourselves. It seems so much more of a motivation and less of a fear-based mentality. And I think as a theist, the promise of heaven was not enough to be able to overcome the fear of the entire message, not the fear of hell. I was less afraid of hell as I was just afraid of everything. Politically, I was afraid. There was the devil around every corner to try to get you. The whole supernatural realm of fear-based, I can only speak for me. And I'm from Oklahoma City area, but still, it's the buckle of the Bible Belt, the rhinestone on the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it is such a fear-based lifestyle. Once that was shed, even the fear of death no longer has sway as it used to.
I'm amazed at, even when I was in religion and surrounded by religious people, that the fear of death was pretty prevalent. And it's really kind of amazing in the context of heaven. I mean, if you're going to a place that is more beautiful than any mere mortal can imagine, and you are experiencing joy beyond words, and you are at the right hand of the Father, and you are in a mansion with pearly gates and streets of gold and angel song, and it's perfect with a capital P. I would think you would never click a seatbelt. You'd never
Absolutely.
buy a handgun. You'd never lock your door at night. You'd think, come on, the sooner the better, right?
Absolutely. I think that's why Bill Maher had talked about the suicide bombers are true believers. I mean, they are committed. They have drank the Kool-Aid. They are all in. I mean, at least from if we judge them by their behaviors. But as much as I protested that I believed, I now even doubt if I believe that, because yes, if you truly believe that all of these wonderful things, then you should have absolutely no fear of anything, because if an accident befalls you, then you're going off into a truly better place. There should never be any mourning or funerals. Why would you mourn someone who actually is passing away and going into heaven? You truly should be excited, but we're not, because I think deep-seated belief we know is false. I mean, perhaps I'm just kind of projecting there.
Speaking of Bill Maher, did you see Religulous? There's a scene in the film where he's talking to some religious dude, and the guy's going through the apologetics lines one by one. So you believe that you'll die, and you believe you'll live forever in heaven, and you believe this life is worthless, and you believe, and the guy said, yeah. And then he just stops and totally deadpan said, so why don't you kill yourself? I mean, it was just, and the guy just stared at him like he was, like he'd been kicked in the teeth. It's so pretty up there. Why don't you're just taking up oxygen down here on planet Earth, dude. Just kill yourself. So,
which I can only imagine that back in the day, nobody ever had a problem with suicide until the church realized that when they said that you'll die, go to heaven, and it probably was such an appealing idea that possibly people tried it, and the church had to rethink, going, wait, we got to keep them from doing that. We're going to lose our congregation. So make it the sin to do so, which would be your last sin, so you'd never make it in. Yes.
Glad you escaped, my friend, and thank you for the kind words and for being a part of the broadcast. Means a lot.
Keep up the good work. Big fan.
Thanks, man. Take care. I had a message in from a gentleman whose name I'm not going to give. I know he gave his name in the email, but it's a very personal story, and I just want to make sure that I'm not sort of betraying any confidences because it is a very personal account. It says this: one day in the summer between freshman and sophomore year, I decided to kill myself. I found my father's revolver and loaded it. I put it in my mouth and pulled the trigger. I heard the hammer drop, but nothing happened. The bullet, as it turns out, was a dud. At the time, this only served to worsen my mood. I thought, fucking great, I can't even do this right. I look back at this today and I barely even believe it's true. The chances of something like that actually happening are extremely slim. And yet my life today is proof the religious would claim this as divine intervention or a miracle. All I can say is I'm so grateful my attempt at my own life failed. If you'd asked a few years ago if I feared death, I would have laughed. It wasn't until later when I discovered love that I began to realize how each day meant something new and important in the story of my life. Today I fear death with that same piercing, aching terror as everyone else does, and I, for one, am grateful for it. My only regret is knowing I will one day lose my loved ones. Thanks for listening to me rant, Seth. I've never told another soul this. But if this makes it to air and my story helps someone not make the same mistake I almost did, then it will be worth it. Thank you for sharing that. William said, in 1990, I was part of a training accident, quote unquote, training accident while in the Army. Left me dead for 1 minute, 17 seconds. People ask me all the time about what I saw and experienced. There was no white light, no tunnel, no chorus of winged babies, hell, not even any beer volcanoes and strippers. What I experienced was complete awareness in a darkened haze, like walking through fog at night. Next thing I know, I'm back and immobile, full body cast, and thinking how funny everything was. I was pretty heavily doped up at the time. As for what, or if there's something beyond, No idea. Perhaps we have one last fling of consciousness before we go poof. Or there might be something there, but it's not from some invisible magical giant. That much I can and will verify as bullshit. I also write sci-fi fantasy with one book on the shelves, and I've used a version of the afterlife to coincide with the nature of the setting I'd made in the, quote, Bible of the universe I'd created. Having a concept like that is great in writing fiction and to entertain. Using it as a tool in writing is fun for the readers and the writers creating the situation, as long as they take the works as they're intended, as namely fiction. That's my opinion. Ambiguous, perhaps, but it's my experience, and that's all I can base or express my comments from. Thanks, sincerely, William. Tara sent a message and said, Seth, I've written in before about how I cope with life, but when you posted about the fear of death, I wanted to give you a different perspective that might not really be all that unique. I don't want to die. No one does. The whole point of religion was to feel protected, superior, and immortal. Guess what we actually have none of? I don't fear death, I embrace it. I've come to understand that it's going to happen whether I like it or not, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I might delay it with daily exercise, healthy eating, vitamins, and lots of laughter, but it will come in the end. We had a loss in my city recently. A healthy man was struck down in his 30s by the flu. His amazing immune system worked against him, and he died. He didn't stand a chance. That just shows you never know when it's coming. But why fear it? Why give in? I have life insurance, accidental death, and I've made other provisions to ensure my family will be taken care of when I'm gone. I never miss an opportunity to tell them I love them, and I shower my boys with all my affection every day. I make sure they know they are loved. Knowing death is coming and preparing for it isn't fear, it's understanding. A sort of, if you will excuse the phrasing, personal relationship. This has helped me push myself harder in life, but has forced me also to slow down and enjoy it. I spend my free time playing with the kids, going on walks with their father, date nights, bedtime stories, and long and sometimes expensive vacations. We travel. We go to volcanoes. We go to the ocean. We live. And that's all we can do to fight death. And in the end, we're remembered not how we died, but how we lived. Who did we love, inspire, or help succeed? Did you love as much as you could, whenever you could? Did you stand up for what's right? Did you help your fellow man? Did you live your life in the best way you possibly could? My advice to anyone afraid of death is to focus more on living. Death will come, but what you do between now and then will define you and can change you in ways you never imagined. I have, and I've got to say I'm loving my noisy, wild, and loving life. And death is just a small echo in the background. Tara, thanks so much for the message. What's that saying that says, life is 2 dates separated by a dash? Make the most of the dash. There's a classic poem, author unknown, called Not How Did He Die, but How Did He Live? It goes like this. Not how did he die, but how did he live? Not what did he gain, but what did he give? These are the units to measure the worth of a man as a man, regardless of birth. Not what was his church, nor what was his creed, but had he befriended those really in need? Was he ever ready with a word of good cheer to bring back a smile, to banish a tear? Not what did the sketch in the newspaper say, but how many were sorry when he passed away. William Shakespeare in Julius Caesar had written, cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. There's a great piece that's kind of floating around the internet, and has been for a while, by the American musician and performer Aaron Freeman, who apparently spoke these words from the stage, and they kind of took on a life of their own. And it essentially asserts that you want not a pastor, not a priest, but a physicist to speak at your funeral. I'll just read the piece for you here. I think I may have read it a couple of years ago on a show we did about grief or grieving, and it just seemed relevant again tonight. You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy so they will understand your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos you gave as good as you got. And at one point you'd hope that the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell him that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let her know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes, that those photons created within her constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much all our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves with their programs, as he says it, and he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we who mourn continue the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should not have faith. Let them know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound, and that they'll be comforted to know your energy is still around. According to the law of conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly. Amen. I wanted to end tonight's broadcast with the audio of a production I did a few years ago, which dealt with death, what life means, what death means. Is there any real merit in focusing on the afterlife? And that's the title of the video. It's funny, when I was listening to the audio alone without the visuals, and I'll include the link to that video in the description box here, so in case you'd like to go and be able to see the visuals that sort of support the audio, you can. But it's a different experience as radio. Somehow it became a little more intimate. It was a different piece. It was a different feel, a different kind of effect. And so whether you've heard Afterlife or not, I would encourage you to sort of find a place where you can relax and crank the audio up and just sort of immerse yourself in the next 9 minutes. The video features the voices and the perspectives of YouTube atheists, Dark Matter 2525, Ashley Paramore, Evidence, Mad Dillahunty, Lacey Green, Christina Rad, DPR Jones, Aaron Raw, Thunderfoot, and myself. And I'm going to make this audio the very last part of the show. There won't be the outro tag. You won't hear the announcer voice. Certainly, we do want to thank our sponsor. Huge thanks out to NatureBox for supporting the evening, supporting the broadcast, supporting this whole thing. They are greatly appreciated. And again, you can go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. But that's not the last thing I wanted you to hear tonight. The last thing you hear will be the ending of the promo as we sort of contemplate our place in the universe. I hope it encourages you, inspires you, reminds you of the wonder and beauty of being alive and how fortunate we all are to be able to share this time together. The piece is called Afterlife.
If you spent a lovely day at the beach and then returned the following weekend knowing that it had one fewer grain of sand, would it seem like a different beach? So too would the universe continue in its ways if humanity weren't here to witness it.
The universe is absolutely massive, and we are virtually insignificant in it.
I've seen no evidence that the rest of the universe cares we exist or is even capable of caring. But I don't really need validation from the rest of the universe to find my own life important.
Why are you, and why was I, willing to sacrifice my humanity, sacrifice the sum total of human experience and interaction, the sum total of human knowledge, on the altar of a dream?
On occasion had people tell me that my life must be so depressing because I'm an atheist. It's doom and gloom, and once you die, it's all over. And it's just absurd to me how many people live for dying in this weird way.
I think fragile, fearful humans were terrified of death, and so they wrote their own ending to the story. This happy fantasy, a place where they'll be reunited with people they've lost. They'll experience constant joy. And of course, they'll never, ever die.
To me, living for the afterlife, thoughtlessly following a set of what not to do rules which you cannot question, that's basically devaluing your life in favor of worshipping death.
And apart from the lack of evidence of a heaven or hell, there is another problem that the concept of an afterlife has. It is to diminish the value that we place on our lives in the here and now.
An unlimited supply of anything, including life, means that its existence cannot be appreciated. If life is eternal, then there should be no sense of urgency.
The worst aspect of Western monotheism is their system of judgment, wherein it doesn't matter how good or bad you were in life. You won't be judged according to your deeds the way you should be. It doesn't matter what an evil, selfish, sadistic, bigoted victimizer you were in life. All sins can be forgiven if you but believe.
I do not fear being dead, but the concept of the alternatives offered by the religious do trouble me. Consider the more palatable alternative of the two, heaven as opposed to hell. Whilst descriptions of heaven are as diverse as those who believe in heaven, there does appear to be one constant. It will last for eternity. Imagine that. Imagine eternity.
Given eternity, everything that can be accomplished will be accomplished. Beyond all achievements, there would be only limitless, pointless existence.
The first 100 years may be passable. The first 1,000 more painful. The first 10,000 insufferable. But this is just the start. An eternity in heaven would be hell for me.
When I think about my own death, I used to feel scared, but I don't think I do anymore.
I'm not afraid of being dead. After we die, we will not know the truth at that point. We will not know, wish, think, remember, dream, anything.
When we look at what a human being is, what their identity is, that I am this collection of my memories, my hopes, my dreams, my desires, my consciousness exists as a product of the brain that is in this body. That ends at death.
I don't find this sad or tragic either. I don't really welcome death, but I don't live in fear of the end. And I've come to see it as just another part of the natural world.
And to borrow from Mark Twain, I have been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it.
In some respects, we never die. Our lives are entangled with those who come after us, just as our lives are entangled with those who came before us. I mean, there is scarcely a living soul on this planet that doesn't go to bed at night without their lives in some way being affected by the work of the hands and minds of folks like Faraday, Newton, and Pasteur. But these entanglements go way beyond the vulgarly obvious main roots, for similarly, almost everyone's life is intertwined with the people who grew the grain and made the bread that these men ate. So it becomes clear that death is not the end. We are intertwined with both lesser and greater themes.
Just because there is no grand scheme that it plays into doesn't mean that there's not something beautiful about what's going on here.
Ironically enough, the only part of me that is, for all intents and purposes, immortal is my material body. Because after I die, and after our sun dies, and after the planetary nebula it leaves behind fades away, every atom of me will be recycled back into the universe, ultimately becoming part of other planets and stars. We are all originally stardust, literally, and we will be stardust again and forever.
Even though a cell might not last forever, the role it played in the life of the larger organism was important, and that is how I see myself, as a part of something bigger.
I have everything to live for. I don't want people to mourn over my death. If anything, I want them to celebrate my life, to celebrate what I have accomplished.
I for one think that your life becomes more meaningful when your beliefs are based in reality. Knowing that this life is the only one I have makes me a lot more conscious of my actions. Makes me want to do something with this short life I have. Make some improvement in the world, however small it may be.
There's too much to learn, there's too much to see, there's too much to know, there's too much to experience. I'm not just going to exist. I'm going to live.
For the beauty that cannot be seen, for the honor of those whose shoulders we stand on, for the hope of those we aspire to become, and for the inspiration of those who will surpass our achievements.
Life is a precious, brief, fragile, amazing thing. And instead of being so fixated on living after death, I want to truly live before it. And be thankful that against incredible odds, I was able to witness this particular part of the universe with my own eyes, firsthand.